man, Matthew 1:24-25, and knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son. And Matthew 1:18, before they came together she was found with child. Although these verses support a virgin birth, many verses clearly say, either directly or implicitly, that Joseph was the natural father of Jesus. John 6:42, for instance, says, "Is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph?" Luke 4:22 says, "Is not this Joseph's son?" Luke 2:33 says, "His father and his mother marveled." Luke 2:27 says, "When the parents brought in the child Jesus." Matthew 13:55 says, "Is not this the carpenter's son?" And Luke 2:48 says, "His mother said, Behold, thy father, and I have sought thee." Unquote. Notice that Mary refers to Joseph as the father of Jesus. And who's in a better position to know? Romans 1:3 and 9:5, 2 Timothy 2:8, Revelations 22:16, and Acts 13:22-23 also show that Jesus had to have been the product of a natural birth. Otherwise, he could not have been a physical descendant of David, as is required of the Messiah. The Messiah must be of Davidic descent, as Acts 2:30, Jeremiah 23:5, 2 Samuel 7:12-13, Psalm 89:3-4, Psalm 132:11, and Luke 1:32-33 prove beyond any reasonable doubt. Incidentally, as an interesting side note to this whole issue, one can't help but wonder how the birth could have been natural if one of the parents was an unnatural Holy Spirit. But to move on, a second problem with the virgin birth is that according to some verses already mentioned, as well as Matthew 1:1-16 and Luke 3:23-31, Joseph was a descendant of David and the father of Jesus. But Joseph couldn't be the physical father of Jesus if Jesus had a virgin birth. If Joseph was not the physical father of Jesus, then Jesus couldn't be of David's seed. That in turn would prevent any possibility of him being the Messiah. Verses previously referred to show that one must be a physical descendant of David in order to be the Messiah. The conclusion to be drawn is that Christians must abandon either the virgin birth or the idea that Jesus is the Messiah. As was noted in a prior program, they are wholly incompatible. How could Jesus be of Davidic descent according to the flesh, as is required by Romans 1:3 and 9:5, if Joseph was not his physical father and he emerged from a virgin birth? A virgin birth would destroy the physical chain, the link between generations. And if there is a physical link, then the virgin birth is destroyed. A third problem with the virgin birth is that it has no real Old Testament support, prophetic or otherwise. And the only prophecy that is supposedly a prognosticator of this momentous event, Isaiah 7:14, is plagued with difficulties. Isaiah 7:14 in the King James Version says, quote, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Yet those who repeatedly claim this verse is referring to Jesus conveniently ignore some vital facts. A, Christian translators changed the Hebrew word almah, which means a young woman or in Hebrew, to virgin. The actual Hebrew word for virgin is Bethulah. Genesis 24:43 in the Revised Standard Version and Exodus 2:8 in the King James show that almah means a young woman or maid, not virgin. Who knows Hebrew better than the Hebrews? And they say in their modern Masoretic text that the almah in Isaiah 7:14 should be translated as maiden, not virgin. That's how it's translated in Genesis 24:43 and Exodus 2:8. Proverbs 30:19 in both the Revised Standard and the King James also says that Almah should be translated as maid. B. Some translators say shall conceive in Isaiah should have been translated as is with, which is in the present tense, and shows it pertains to a woman existing in Isaiah's time, not 700 years later when Jesus lived. Other critics go even farther and claim shall conceive was translated from hara, which actually means has conceived. They say hara is the Hebrew perfect tense, which represents past completed action in English, and is therefore referring to a woman who conceived before Isaiah, not in the future. C. How could the birth of a child convey any message to Ahaz in Isaiah's time if the child was to be born 700 years later after Ahaz lived? D. Except for Matthew 1:23's reference to this prophecy in Isaiah, Jesus was never referred to as Emmanuel in the New Testament and has never been called Emmanuel except by those who do so in order to fulfill the prophecy. E. According to Luke 1:31, Jesus was supposed to be called Jesus, not Emmanuel. F. And lastly, Jesus couldn't be the Emmanuel referred to by Isaiah, since Emmanuel means God is with us, whereas Joshua, or Jesus, means Yahweh is salvation. A fourth problem arising from the birth of Jesus lies in the fact that the Bible repeatedly says nothing pure can come from a woman.